3 masked men, 1 female CEO, and 8 seconds that would expose a billion-dollar conspiracy and ignite an impossible love story. When former Special Operations Operative Bennett Steele witnessed masked attackers dragging tech billionaire Adeline Scott into a van outside a downtown Chicago parking garage, he had no idea his 10-year-old daughter's safety lessons would thrust him back into the world he'd abandoned, or that saving Adeline's life would become the mission that changed everything. The men had weapons, tactical gear, and a detailed extraction plan. Bennett had 8 seconds to decide stay invisible like he'd promised himself after losing everything, or become the weapon he'd spent 3 years trying to forget. What happened in those 8 seconds would unravel a conspiracy reaching the highest levels of corporate espionage, put his daughter in unimaginable danger, and prove that some men are born protectors, even when protection means sacrificing the peaceful life they fought so hard to build. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The autumn rain hammered against the windows of Palmer's Diner, a 24-hour establishment tucked between a laundromat and a pawn shop on Chicago's South Side. Bennett Steele wiped down the counter for the 3rd time in 10 minutes, his calloused hands moving in mechanical circles while his mind wandered to places he'd trained himself not to go. At 38, Bennett looked like exactly what he was, a tired single father working double shifts to keep his head above water. His dark hair was starting to show gray at the temples. His shoulders, once broad and powerful from years of intense training, had begun to carry the slight slouch of exhaustion. The only hints of his past life were the tattoos barely visible beneath his rolled-up sleeves and the way his eyes never stopped scanning the room, cataloging exits and assessing threats that probably weren't there. "Dad, I finished my homework." Leela appeared from the back booth where she'd been camped for the past 2 hours, her backpack decorated with hand-drawn sea turtles and dolphins. At 10 years old, she had her mother's auburn hair and Bennett's sharp observational skills, a combination that made her far too perceptive for her age. "All of it? Even the math problems you were complaining about?" Bennett raised an eyebrow, setting down his cleaning rag. "Yes, all of it. Mrs. Patterson gave us pre-algebra, which is totally unfair because we're only in 5th grade. But I figured it out." She climbed onto a stool at the counter, her sneakers dangling well above the floor. "Can we go home soon? I'm tired, and you promised we'd watch that documentary about octopuses." Bennett glanced at the clock. 9:47 p.m. His shift didn't end until midnight, but the diner was nearly empty. Just one regular nursing his 4th coffee in the corner booth, and a couple finishing their pie. His manager, a gruff woman named Pauline, who'd given him this job 3 years ago without asking too many questions, was already doing prep work in the kitchen. "Let me check with Pauline. Maybe she'll let us leave early tonight." "Really?" Lila's face lit up with the kind of pure joy that made every terrible decision Bennett had ever made feel worthwhile. 3 years ago, Bennett Steele had been someone else entirely. Lieutenant Commander Bennett Steele, to be exact, leading operations in places whose names he'd never be allowed to speak. He'd spent a decade in naval special warfare, earning commendations and scars in equal measure. He'd been good at it, maybe too good. The kind of operator who could compartmentalize violence and still sleep at night. Then Emily died, his wife. The brilliant architect who designed community centers and affordable housing, who'd believed in building things up instead of tearing them down, had been killed by a drunk driver while Bennett was overseas. He'd gotten the news via satellite phone in a desert compound 8,000 miles away, too far to make it home in time for her funeral, too far to hold his daughter while she cried, too far to be the father and husband he'd promised to be. He'd submitted his resignation papers the day he returned stateside. No amount of duty or honor or patriotic purpose was worth missing his daughter's life. Emily had died surrounded by strangers while he'd been playing hero for a country that would never know his name. That wasn't happening again. So Bennett Steele, decorated Special Operations Officer, became Bennett Steele, diner cook and occasional night manager. He moved to Chicago for its anonymity, found a small 2-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood where people minded their own business, and built a quiet life around Lila's needs. School pickups and homework help, macaroni and cheese dinners, bedtime stories about her mother, keeping Emily's memory alive even as Bennett tried to bury his own past. The work was simple. The pay was terrible. And for 3 years, it had been exactly what Bennett needed. Pauline emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. "You two get out of here. It's dead tonight and you look like death warmed over, Steele. Go home. Watch your fish show." "Octopus documentary," Lila corrected seriously. "Octopuses are mollusks, not fish. They have 3 hearts and blue blood, and can squeeze through any opening bigger than their beak. Smart kid you got there." Pauline smiled, the expression softening her normally stern features. "Go on before I change my mind." Bennett didn't need to be told twice. He collected their coats from the back, helped Lila into her rain jacket, and grabbed his own worn leather jacket, the one with the tear in the left shoulder he kept meaning to repair. The diner was only 6 blocks from their apartment, an easy walk even in the rain. They stepped out into the wet Chicago night. The city smelled like rain and asphalt, car exhaust, and the Thai restaurant 2 doors down. Streetlights reflected in puddles, creating a mosaic of amber and shadow. Traffic hummed in the distance, the eternal heartbeat of urban life. "Dad?" Lila's hand found his as they walked, her small fingers cold despite her gloves. "Yeah, kiddo? Do you miss your old job? The one before we moved here?" The question caught him off guard. They rarely talked about his Navy career. He'd told Lila the basics, that he'd been in the service, that he'd traveled a lot, that he'd decided being her father was more important than anything else. She'd been 7 when Emily died, old enough to remember her mother, but young enough that the memories were already starting to fade. Bennett had promised himself he'd never let her forget. "Sometimes," he answered honestly. "Parts of it anyway. I had good friends. We did important work. But I don't miss being away from you. Not for a second. Mrs. Patterson said my essay about courage was really good. I wrote about you, about how you left your job to take care of me after Mom died." She said that was the bravest thing she'd ever heard. Bennett's throat tightened. "Your mom was the brave one, Lila. She built things that helped people. I made different choices. You protect people. That's what Mom told me before she died. She said you protected people who couldn't protect themselves, that you were a hero even if you couldn't talk about it." Lila looked up at him, raindrops catching in her hair. "I think protecting me counts. I think that makes you a hero too. I'm just your dad, kiddo. That's all I need to be." They walked in comfortable silence for another block, passing closed storefronts and the occasional pedestrian hurrying through the rain. Bennett's mind drifted to the bills stacked on his kitchen counter. The notice from Lila's school about the upcoming field trip he couldn't afford. The persistent check engine light in his 15-year-old sedan. This wasn't the life he'd imagined when he'd married Emily, when they'd talked about buying a house and giving Lila siblings and building something permanent. But it was honest work. Clean work. No one died because of his decisions. No one woke up screaming from nightmares about things he'd done in service to his country. He might be barely scraping by, but Lila was safe, healthy, and happy. That had to be enough. They were half a block from their apartment building when Bennett's instincts, dormant but never truly gone, suddenly screamed a warning. His body responded before his conscious mind processed why. His hand tightening on Lila's, his stride shortening. His attention sharpening to laser focus up ahead. In the parking garage adjacent to their building, something was wrong. 3 men in dark clothing surrounded a woman near a white van. The men moved with purpose, with coordination. The woman struggled, her designer heels skidding on wet concrete as she tried to pull away. Bennett's training cataloged details in microseconds. The men wore matching tactical gloves. One had his hand over the woman's mouth. Another was opening the van's sliding door. The third scanned the perimeter, his posture suggesting a weapon concealed under his jacket. This wasn't a mugging. This was a professional extraction, and the woman. Even from this distance, even in the rain and shadow, Bennett recognized her face from the business news that played on the diner's TV. Adeline Scott, CEO of Frontier Tech Industries, one of the fastest-growing cybersecurity firms in the country. Forbes had just run a profile on her. 36 years old, self-made billionaire, revolutionizing data protection. She was being kidnapped right in front of him. Leela, listen to me very carefully. Bennett's voice came out low and controlled, the command tone he hadn't used in 3 years. He crouched down to her eye level, his hands on her shoulders. I need you to go into our building right now. Use your key. Lock the door behind you. Call 911 and tell them there's a kidnapping at the West Side parking garage on Monroe Street. Then call Pauline at the diner. Can you do that for me? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Lila's eyes went wide, but she didn't panic. She'd inherited her mother's calm in crisis. What are you going to do? Something I really hoped I'd never have to do again. He pressed his apartment key into her palm. Go now, baby. Fast but quiet. Don't look back. I'll be home soon. Dad, you promised you wouldn't. I know what I promised. But that woman needs help, and I'm the only one here who can give it. Now go. Leela ran, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders as she sprinted toward their building's entrance. Bennett watched until she was safely inside, saw the door close behind her, then turned his full attention back to the parking garage, the tactical part of his brain. The part he'd tried to retire, roared back to life with frightening ease. 3 hostels, 1 principal, enclosed space with multiple vehicles for cover, unknown weapons loadout, unknown backup in the van. Rules of engagement: protect the principal, neutralize threats, minimize civilian casualties, extract alive. He'd done this exact scenario hundreds of times in training, dozens of times in the field. The muscle memory didn't fade just because you put on an apron and served hash browns for 3 years. Bennett moved into the parking garage with practiced silence, using parked cars for concealment as he closed the distance. The rain covered the sound of his footsteps. The poor lighting worked in his favor. He got within 20 feet before any of the attackers noticed him. The woman, Adeline Scott, had stopped struggling. Smart. She was conserving energy, waiting for an opportunity. Her eyes darted around, looking for escape routes, for witnesses, for anything she could use. When her gaze landed on Bennett, he saw the calculation shift. Hope, maybe. Or at least the possibility of it. Hey! Bennett called out, his voice carrying authority despite his diner uniform. Chicago PD has been called. Let her go and walk away. This doesn't have to get messy. The 3 men froze for a half second. Then the one scanning the perimeter, the lookout, turned toward Bennett. In the dim light, Bennett could see the cold assessment in his eyes. Professional, not street thugs. Probably former law enforcement or private security. Walk away, friend, the lookout said. His accent was neutral American, no regional markers. This is corporate business. Doesn't concern you. That woman doesn't look like she's here voluntarily. That makes it my business. You sure you want to die for someone you don't know? The man's hand moved toward his jacket. Because that's what happens if you don't turn around right now. Bennett had already assessed his odds. 3 armed professionals versus 1 unarmed diner cook who hadn't been in a fight in 3 years. On paper, it was suicide. But Bennett wasn't operating on paper. He was operating on a decade of training that had made violence as natural as breathing. On muscle memory that didn't care how long it had been. On the absolute certainty that if he walked away, Adeline Scott would disappear into that van and probably never be seen alive again. And he'd made a promise to Emily, whispered at her gravesite 3 years ago. He'd promised to be better, to use his skills to protect, not to walk past suffering because it was safer or easier. "I'm sure," Bennett said calmly. "Last chance. Let her go." The lookout's hand completed its movement, pulling a compact pistol from a shoulder holster. He didn't aim it directly at Bennett, just held it low and ready. A statement of superior force. That was his first mistake. Bennett was already moving before the gun fully cleared the jacket. 10 years of close-quarters combat training compressed into explosive action. He closed the distance in 3 strides, faster than the gunman expected. His left hand swept up, caught the weapon slide, pushing it away from center mass while his right hand drove forward into the man's throat. Not full force, calculated pressure, enough to stagger and disable without killing. The pistol clattered to the concrete as the lookout dropped, gasping for air. Bennett scooped it up in one smooth motion, checked the chamber, magazine, safety, loaded. Glock 19, good weapon. He didn't aim it at the remaining attackers, just held it with professional competence that sent a clear message. Amateur hour was over. "Now we renegotiate," Bennett said, his voice flat and cold. "You two let the woman go and get in your van. Drive away. I keep your friend's gun and nobody dies tonight. Or we do this the hard way and I promise you won't like how it ends." The man holding Adeline looked at his partner, the one who'd been opening the van door. Some kind of silent communication passed between them. Then the van door guy reached into his jacket. Bennett's arm came up. The Glock tracking center mass, 11 pounds of pressure on a 5-pound trigger. "Don't." But the man kept moving, committed to his action. His hand emerged with a taser, not a gun. He fired at Bennett from 15 feet away. Bennett twisted, the taser probes missing by inches. Then he closed again. He couldn't shoot, not with Adeline so close. Not without knowing if there were other civilians nearby. Not without absolute certainty it was necessary. So he did what he'd been trained to do. He got close and got violent. The taser-wielding attacker tried to backpedal, but Bennett was faster. A strike to the wrist sent the taser spinning away. A sweep of the legs put the man on the ground. Bennett's knee found the solar plexus, driving the air from his lungs. Then pressure to the carotid artery, cutting blood flow to the brain. 10 seconds and the man went limp, unconscious but alive. 2 down. The last attacker, the one holding Adeline, had a choice to make. He chose violence. He shoved Adeline hard toward a parked car, reaching for his own weapon. But he made the mistake of taking his eyes off Bennett to locate his gun. Bennett covered the space between them before the weapon cleared its holster. His hand locked on the attacker's wrist, twisting sharply. Bone cracked. The man screamed. Bennett drove his elbow into the man's temple. A precise strike that shut down consciousness like flipping a switch. 3 down. 8 seconds, start to finish. Bennett stood in the parking garage, his heart rate barely elevated. 3 unconscious attackers at his feet, and a stolen Glock in his hand. The rain continued to fall. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. And Adeline Scott stared at him with a mixture of shock, relief, and dawning recognition that her rescuer was not a Chicago cop. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice shaking but steady. "Just someone who was walking by," Bennett said, already hearing the lies he'd have to tell. Already knowing his quiet life had just ended. Adeline Scott had excellent instincts. It was one of the reasons she'd built a billion-dollar company before turning 36. Those instincts were currently telling her that the man in the diner uniform who'd just taken down 3 armed attackers in less time than it took to microwave popcorn was absolutely not just someone who was walking by. "You're lying," she said, straightening her torn blouse and pushing wet hair from her face. "Nobody moves like that. Nobody fights like that unless they've had serious training." Bennett was already assessing their situation. The attackers were down but not dead. The unconscious lookout was starting to stir. Police sirens were maybe 2 minutes out. He needed to secure the scene, check for additional threats, and figure out how to explain this without his entire past getting dragged into the light. "Are you hurt?" he asked, ignoring her observation. "No, I'm fine. They didn't have time to hurt me." "But you didn't answer my question. Not the time for questions." Bennett quickly zip-tied the attacker's hands using the plastic restraints they'd brought for Adeline. A bit of poetic justice. He cleared the van, found it empty except for restraints and sedatives, professional kidnapping equipment. "Do you know why they were taking you?" "I have some ideas." Adeline wrapped her arms around herself, adrenaline finally catching up with her. "My company specializes in quantum encryption. We just signed a contract with 3 major banks and 2 government agencies. A lot of people would pay serious money to get their hands on our technology. Corporate espionage with a kidnapping twist." "Great." Bennett's phone buzzed. A text from Lila. "Police coming. Pauline is here. Are you okay?" He typed back quickly, "I'm fine. Stay inside. I love you." "You have a daughter," Adeline said, watching him. "That's what you told her before you sent her away." "I saw her running." Bennett's jaw tightened. His daughter was now connected to the situation, her face potentially visible on whatever security cameras covered this garage. The anonymity he'd built so carefully was cracking. "She's safe. That's all that matters. I heard what you told these men. You said Chicago PD was coming, but you didn't show a badge. You're not a cop." Adeline stepped closer, studying his face. "But you knew exactly how to handle them. The way you moved, the way you assessed threats, that wasn't amateur self-defense. That was military, wasn't it? Special operations. Like I said, not the time. Operations. Like I said, not the time." But she was right, and they both knew it. Police cruisers screeched into the parking garage, lights painting everything in red and blue. Officers poured out, weapons drawn, shouting commands. Bennett carefully set down the Glock, raised his hands, and assumed the position he'd seen 1,000 civilians take. Cooperative, non-threatening, just a good Samaritan, who'd stumbled into trouble. The next 3 hours were a bureaucratic nightmare. Police separated Bennett and Adeline, took statements in different locations. Bennett stuck to his story. He was walking home from work, saw the attack, intervened. Yes, he had military training. No, nothing special, just regular service, nothing worth discussing. The attackers had dropped their weapon. He'd picked it up. Got lucky with the timing. That was all. The detective interviewing him, a sharp-eyed woman named Foster, wasn't buying it entirely. "Mr. Steele, your story has some gaps. 3 men, all with weapons, all with tactical training based on their gear, and you took them down in seconds. Our timeline from the 911 call to first responder arrival gives you maybe 8 seconds of engagement. That's not luck. That's expertise. I acted on instinct, detective. Saw someone in trouble. Helped. Isn't that what we're supposed to do?" "It is." Foster leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "But most people don't have instincts that result in 3 unconscious suspects with broken bones and precision strikes to non-lethal targets. You held back, Mr. Steele. You could have killed all 3 easily, but you didn't. That shows restraint that comes from extensive training." Bennett said nothing. He'd learned long ago that silence was often the best defense. I ran your background, Foster continued. Bennett Steele, age 38, former Navy. Honorable discharge 3 years ago. Before that, 10 years of service with significant gaps in your record. Entire years where your duty station is listed as classified. You were special operations, weren't you? SEAL team, probably. Maybe even more specialized than that. I served my country. Then I came home to raise my daughter. That's all there is to it. Miss Scott wants to thank you personally. She's been asking about you since we separated you. Says you saved her life. Foster slid a business card across the table. She also says she wants to offer you a job. Head of security for her company. 6 figures, full benefits, the works. That's a big step up from Palmer's Diner. Bennett looked at the card without touching it. I'm happy where I am, are you? Because from where I sit, you're a highly trained operator working for minimum wage plus tips, living in a rent-controlled apartment on the south side. Your daughter deserves better. You deserve better. Foster's expression softened slightly. Look, I'm not trying to dig into your past or make your life difficult. But Ms. Scott is in real danger. Those men we arrested? They lawyered up immediately. High-priced attorneys, the kind that suggest serious money behind this operation. They'll be out on bail by morning, and whoever hired them will try again. She needs professional protection, and you've already proven you can provide it. She should hire a security firm. Lots of qualified people out there. She wants you. Says she trusts you. And Mr. Steele, between you and me, her current security detail clearly failed. Those men knew her schedule, knew her route, knew exactly where to intercept her. That suggests an inside leak. She needs someone outside her organization. Someone with your particular skills. Before Bennett could respond, there was a commotion outside the interrogation room. Raised voices, someone demanding entry. The door opened and Adeline Scott walked in, followed by a man in an expensive suit who was clearly her lawyer. Detective Foster, my client would like to speak with Mr. Steele, the lawyer said smoothly. Unless you're charging him with something? No charges, Mr. Steele is free to go. Foster stood, gave Bennett a long look. But I strongly suggest you think about Miss Scott's offer. You did good work tonight. Saved a life. That matters. After Foster left, Adeline sat down across from Bennett. Without her fear and adrenaline, she looked younger than her business photos suggested. Dark circles under her eyes spoke of sleepless nights. Her hands folded on the table, trembled slightly. Thank you, she said simply, for not walking away. Most people would have. Most people don't have the training to help. I did. Wasn't really a choice. Detective Foster told me you have a daughter. I'm sorry she had to see any of that, had to be anywhere near this situation. She's fine. Safe at home. Bennett stood, ready to leave. You should take the detective's advice. Hire professional security. Someone with resources and a team. I'm trying to hire you. I'm not in that business anymore. But you were. And you're good at it. Better than anyone I've seen. Adeline stood as well, meeting his eyes. Mr. Steele, Bennett, those men were going to take me. They were going to drug me, transport me somewhere, and either force me to give up my company's technology or kill me when I refused. You stopped that. You saved my life in 8 seconds. Anyone would have. No, they wouldn't have. Do you know how many people walked past that parking garage before you arrived? 7, I counted them. 7 people who saw 3 men forcing a woman into a van and decided it wasn't their problem. But you didn't. You sent your daughter to safety, and you put yourself between me and danger. Why? Bennett thought about Emily, about the promise he'd made at her grave. About teaching Lila that the strong protect the weak, that courage means acting when others won't. Because it was the right thing to do. Then keep doing the right thing. Help me. Adeline's voice was urgent now. This won't stop. Whoever hired those men has too much invested. They'll come again, and next time I might not be lucky enough to have a former SEAL walking past. I need someone I can trust, and I don't trust anyone in my organization right now. But I trust you because you've already proven you'll risk yourself to protect me, and you have nothing to gain from betraying me. I have a daughter to think about. Getting involved in corporate warfare isn't. I'll pay you $200,000 a year. Full health insurance. College fund for your daughter. And you work remotely when possible. Minimal travel. Flexible hours so you can still be there for her. Adeline pulled out a contract already prepared. 1 year. Help me figure out who's after me and stop them. Then you can go back to your quiet life. But please, Bennett. I need help and you're the only person I trust to give it. Bennett looked at the contract. Thought about Leela's upcoming field trip he couldn't afford, about the check engine light, about working double shifts at a diner when he had skills that could provide so much more. Thought about the promise he'd made to stay away from this life, to be just a father. But he also thought about Emily's voice. The strong protect the weak. That's not just a philosophy, Bennett. It's an obligation. And he thought about Adeline's face when those men had grabbed her. The terror. The desperate hope when she'd seen him. The knowledge that without intervention, she'd have disappeared. 1 year, he said finally. And the first rule is no contact at my apartment. I keep my daughter completely separate from this. Whatever's coming, it doesn't touch her, ever. Agreed. Adeline's relief was palpable. Thank you, Bennett. You won't regret this. But as Bennett signed the contract and officially re-entered the world he'd tried to leave behind, he couldn't shake the feeling that regret was exactly what was coming. Along with danger, violence, and all the things he'd hoped Lila would never have to see again. Outside the police station, the rain had finally stopped. Chicago glittered in the post-storm clarity. And somewhere in that vast city, the people who'd tried to kidnap Adeline Scott were planning their next move. Unaware that they'd just made a critical miscalculation, they'd made an enemy of Bennett. Steele, the morning after the parking garage incident. Bennett woke to find Lila sitting at their tiny kitchen table, staring at him with the kind of serious expression that meant difficult questions were coming. You promised you wouldn't go back to that life, she said quietly, her untouched cereal growing soggy in front of her. You promised when Mom died that you were done being that person. Bennett poured himself coffee, buying time to find the right words. Through their apartment window, Chicago was waking up. Traffic building, people heading to work. The normal rhythm of a city that had no idea 3 armed men had tried to kidnap a billionaire CEO 12 hours ago. I'm not going back to that life, he said, sitting across from her. This is different. It's a temporary job helping someone who needs protection. 1 year, then I'm done. That's what you said before. When you joined the Navy, you said it was just 1 tour. Then it was another tour. Then another. And Mom and I barely saw you. Leela's voice cracked. Then Mom died while you were gone and you promised, Dad. You promised you'd stay. The words hit harder than any punch Bennett had taken in the parking garage. She was right. He'd made promises before and broken them, always for good reasons, always telling himself it was necessary. But promises broken were still broken, regardless of justification. You're right, he said softly. I did promise. And I meant it. But Leela, that woman last night, she was in real danger. The kind of danger that doesn't stop just because someone escapes once. The people after her will try again. And if I don't help her, she'd probably die. What about me? What if something happens to you? What if you die helping her? Tears were streaming down Lila's face now. I already lost Mom. I can't lose you too. Bennett moved around the table, pulled his daughter into a hug. She resisted for a moment, then collapsed against him, sobbing. He held her while she cried, feeling the weight of every decision he'd ever made pressing down on his shoulders. "Nothing is going to happen to me," he whispered into her hair. "I promise. This isn't combat operations. This is security work. Boring meetings and background checks and sitting in offices. The dangerous part is already over." Even as he said it, Bennett knew it was probably a lie. Whoever had sent those 3 men wasn't going to stop. They'd escalate, get more aggressive, more desperate. This was going to get worse before it got better, but Lila didn't need to know that. His phone buzzed. A text from Adeline. "Security team found listening devices in my penthouse. 4 different locations. They've been monitoring me for weeks. Can we meet today?" Bennett typed back, "This afternoon. 2 p.m. Pick somewhere public." They met at Lakefront Park, away from buildings and enclosed spaces where surveillance was easier. Adeline arrived with 2 bodyguards who looked competent but nervous, constantly scanning their surroundings like they expected another attack any moment. "Thank you for coming," Adeline said as Bennett approached. She wore designer jeans and a simple jacket, trying for casual but still radiating wealth. "I know you probably need time to transition from the diner, give notice, but I quit this morning." Pauline understood. "I'm available immediately." Bennett had called the diner at 6 a.m., explained he had a family emergency, thanked Pauline for 3 years of steady employment. She'd told him she always knew he was destined for something more than hash browns. "Tell me about the listening devices." Adeline gestured to a bench overlooking Lake Michigan. They sat while her bodyguards maintained a perimeter at a discreet distance. The autumn wind off the water was cold, carrying the smell of fish and algae. "My security chief, Vincent Russo, swept my entire penthouse after last night," Adeline explained. "Found 4 bugs. Military-grade equipment, not something you buy at a spy store. They were in my bedroom, my home office, my living room, and my bathroom. Whoever placed them had complete access to my private space and wanted to hear everything." "How long has Russo worked for you?" 3 years. He came highly recommended. Former Secret Service, worked protection details for 2 ambassadors and a senator. Adeline pulled her jacket tighter against the wind. "But you're thinking he could be compromised." "Everyone could be compromised. That's rule 1 of security work. Trust but verify, and even then, assume the verification might be false." Bennett watched a jogger pass, cataloging details automatically. "Who has access to your penthouse?" "My housekeeper, Elena. She's been with me for 5 years. Russo and his team, but they only come when I request it. My personal assistant, Kiana Ford, but she works primarily from the office. And my CFO, Dylan Porter, but he hasn't been to my home in months." "What about relationship partners? Anyone you're seeing who has keys or entry codes?" Adeline shook her head. "No one. I haven't dated seriously in 2 years. Building the company took all my time and energy. It's just me up there, which I guess made it easier for whoever planted those bugs." Bennett pulled out a small notebook he'd picked up that morning, started making lists. "We need to assume everything about your life is known. Your schedule, your meetings, your routes, your habits. That's how they knew exactly where to grab you last night. Someone is feeding them real-time intelligence. So what do? We change everything. New apartment, new security team that Russo doesn't select, new communication protocols. We make you unpredictable. And we run a full background investigation on everyone in your inner circle." Bennett looked at her directly. "This is going to be invasive, Adeline. I'll need access to financial records, phone logs, emails. I'll need to investigate your friends, your employees, people you trust. Some of them won't like it. I don't care. Someone tried to kidnap me. Someone has been listening to my private conversations for weeks. I want to know who and why, and I want them stopped." Her jaw set with determination. "Do whatever you need to do. They spent the next hour going over details. Adeline's company, Frontier Tech Industries, specialized in quantum encryption systems. The technology was revolutionary, using quantum entanglement to create theoretically unbreakable codes. 3 major banks had signed contracts worth $800 million total. The Department of Defense was in preliminary talks for military applications. That's a lot of money and power at stake, Bennett observed. Plenty of motivation for corporate espionage. Who lost out when the banks signed with you? Cyber Shield Solutions was the front runner. They've dominated the encryption market for a decade. When I undercut their bid and offered superior technology, they lost nearly $1 billion in projected revenue. Adeline pulled up information on her phone. Their CEO, Preston Ford, publicly called my company a flash in the pan run by an amateur. There's bad blood there. Anyone else with motive? Foreign competitors. My technology would make current Chinese and Russian cyber warfare techniques obsolete. There's been chatter in intelligence circles that several nations would pay serious money to either acquire or destroy my systems. She hesitated. The FBI warned me 6 months ago that I might be a target for industrial espionage. I thought my security was adequate. Obviously, I was wrong. Bennett stood, walked to the edge of the path overlooking the lake. The water stretched to the horizon, gray and endless under cloudy skies. He thought about Leela's tears that morning, about the promise he'd made to stay out of this world, but he also thought about the listening devices in Adeline's bedroom, about the professional extraction team that had nearly succeeded, about the resources and planning behind this operation. This wasn't going away. If he walked away now, Adeline would likely be dead within a month. And whoever killed her would move on to their next target, their next victim. Maybe Emily had been right. Maybe the strong did have an obligation to protect the weak. Maybe his skills weren't just weapons of violence, but tools that could save lives when used correctly. Okay, he said, turning back to face Adeline. Here's how this works. I'm your shadow for the next month. I go where you go, see what you see. I'll coordinate with Russo, but I report only to you. We set up a safe house where you can work remotely when necessary. And we start a systematic investigation of everyone close to you until we find the leak. What about your daughter? You said you wanted to keep her separate from this. I do. Which means irregular hours, sometimes overnight protection details. I'll need to arrange care for Leela when I can't be there. Bennett had already called his former Navy buddy, Ashton Walsh, who lived in the suburbs with his wife and 3 teenagers. Ashton had agreed to be emergency backup for Lila without asking questions. I can arrange for a nanny, someone vetted and paid well. No one you hire, no one connected to your organization. I have people I trust. We use them. Bennett's tone left no room for negotiation. That's non-negotiable. My daughter's safety doesn't get compromised for convenience. Adeline nodded. Understood. What else do you need? Full access to your company's personnel files, financial records, and communication systems. Authorization to interview employees. And I need you to act normal. Maintain your schedule as much as possible while we investigate. Whoever's behind this is watching for changes in your behavior. They're watching right now, aren't they? This meeting, our conversation, they probably know about it. Possibly. But that's okay. Let them know you've hired security. Let them know you're taking this seriously. It might make them nervous, cause them to make mistakes. Bennett started walking back toward the parking area. We start tomorrow. I'll pick you up at 7 a.m. Until then, stay in your penthouse with Russo's team. Don't go anywhere. Don't meet anyone. Don't use your regular phone or computer. I'll bring you a clean device tomorrow. Bennett, Adeline called as he started to leave. Why are you really doing this? It's not just about the money. You could have negotiated for more, asked for equity in the company. But you didn't, so why? He thought about how to answer, about whether to share the truth or deflect with something convenient. Finally, he decided she deserved honesty. Because 3 years ago, my wife died while I was overseas. She was helping someone, trying to make a difference, and a drunk driver killed her. And I wasn't there. I was playing soldier on the other side of the world while the person I loved most died alone. Bennett's voice was steady, but his hands clenched. I can't change that. I can't bring her back. But I can make sure other people don't die when I have the skills to prevent it. That's why I'm doing this. Adeline was quiet for a long moment. She sounds like she was an amazing person. She was. She believed the strong should protect the weak. That we have an obligation to use whatever gifts we have to help others. I'm trying to honor that belief. Then I'm glad you're here. And I promise I won't waste the second chance you gave me last night. As Bennett drove home, his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Mr. Steele, a voice said, accented. Eastern European, maybe Russian. You made a mistake last night. A costly one. A mistake last night. A costly one. Bennett's entire body went on alert. He pulled over, parked. Who is this? Someone with an interest in Miss Scott's future. Someone who doesn't appreciate interference. You should have walked away, Mr. Steele. Now you've made yourself part of this situation. If you're calling to threaten me, save your breath. I don't scare easy. I'm not calling to threaten you. I'm calling to warn you. The people I work for have considerable resources. They will acquire what they want, one way or another. And anyone standing in their way will be removed. That includes you. That includes your daughter Lila, age 10, student at Oakmont Elementary School, picked up most days by her father, but sometimes by Pauline Green from Palmer's Diner. Ice flooded Bennett's veins. They knew about Lila. They knew her school, her routine, the people in her life. If you go near my daughter, then stop protecting Miss Scott. Walk away. Take the money she's paying you and disappear. Do that, and your daughter remains safe. Continue interfering, and I cannot guarantee what might happen. Accidents occur, Mr. Steele, especially to young people who aren't properly supervised. The line went dead. Bennett sat in his parked car, rage and fear warring inside him. They'd threatened Lila, directly, specifically. That changed everything. He had a choice to make. Walk away, keep his daughter safe, let Adeline face her enemies alone. Or dig in, fight back, but risk everything he had left in the world. It wasn't really a choice at all. Bennett spent the next week becoming Adeline's shadow. He drove her to meetings, sat in on conference calls, vetted everyone who came within 10 feet of her. He also spent every spare moment running background checks on her inner circle, looking for the leak that had made her kidnapping attempt possible. Layla stayed with Ashton Walsh's family during Bennett's overnight protection details. She wasn't happy about it, but she understood the necessity. Or at least, she pretended to understand. Bennett could see the worry in her eyes every time he dropped her off. The fear that maybe this time he wouldn't come back. On the 8th day, Bennett found the first real lead. Dylan Porter, Adeline's CFO, had made 3 unexplained deposits totaling $150,000 over the past 6 months. The money came from a consulting company registered in the Cayman Islands. When Bennett traced the company's ownership, it led to a shell corporation, which led to another shell corporation, which eventually led to CyberShield Solutions. Preston Ford's company had been paying Adeline's CFO. Bennett arranged to meet Dylan at a coffee shop in the Loop, somewhere public where confrontation would be difficult. Dylan arrived looking nervous, his usual polished executive appearance slightly disheveled. Dark circles under his eyes suggested he hadn't been sleeping well. "Thanks for meeting me," Bennett said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "I wanted to discuss some irregularities I found in your financial records." Dylan's face went pale. "What irregularities?" $150,000 from a Cayman Islands consulting firm that traces back to CyberShield Solutions. Want to explain what services you've been providing to Adeline's primary competitor? For a long moment, Dylan said nothing. He stared at his untouched coffee, his hands trembling slightly. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "They have my son." Bennett's entire focus sharpened. "What, my son Grayson?" "He's 16. 6 months ago, he went missing after school. The police investigated, found nothing. Then I got a call. A man with an accent told me Grayson was safe, but that he'd stay safe only if I cooperated. He wanted information about Adeline. Her schedule, her security protocols, her meetings. Just information, he said. Nothing that would hurt her. And you believe that? I didn't have a choice." Tears were streaming down Dylan's face now. "They sent me photos of Grayson. Proof of life, they called it. Every week, a new photo showing he was okay. And every week, they'd ask for more information. I kept telling myself it was just corporate espionage, that nobody would get hurt, that I'd get my son back." Bennett's jaw clenched. This was worse than simple corruption. Dylan wasn't a traitor motivated by greed. He was a father being extorted. "Did you tell them about the parking garage? About when Adeline would be there?" "Yes." The word came out as a sob. "They said they just wanted to talk to her, to make an offer she couldn't refuse. I didn't know they were going to kidnap her. I swear, if I'd known, you would have done it anyway because your son's life was at stake." Bennett leaned back, processing this new information. The operation was more sophisticated than he'd realized. They hadn't just planted bugs and hired muscle. They'd identified vulnerabilities in Adeline's organization and exploited them ruthlessly. Does Adeline know? Not yet. But she needs to. And you need to understand something, Dylan. Those people aren't going to give your son back. That's not how this works. They'll keep using you until you're no longer valuable. Then they'll disappear. Your son is leverage, and leverage only works as long as you're alive and cooperating. So what do? You tell me everything. Every contact, every meeting, every piece of information you've given them. We document all of it. Then we use that to find your son." Bennett pulled out his phone, started a voice recording. "Start from the beginning. Tell me exactly how this started." Dylan's story took 30 minutes. The initial contact had come through an encrypted message on his work computer. The demands had been small at first, information that seemed innocuous. Dylan's assistant's schedule, the layout of Frontier Tech's offices, details about security protocols. Then they'd escalated. They wanted Adeline's personal schedule, her home address, her daily routines. "Did you plant the listening devices in her penthouse?" "No, but I gave them her security codes. They must have sent someone in while she was traveling." Dylan's hands wouldn't stop shaking. "I've destroyed everything I worked for. My career, my reputation, my relationship with Adeline. She trusted me, and I betrayed her. You were coerced. There's a difference." Bennett stopped the recording. "Here's what happens next. You continue feeding them information, but now it's information we control. We use you to set a trap. And when they come for what they want, we take them down and get your son back. You really think that will work?" "I think it's the only chance we have. They're not going to negotiate. They're not going to be reasonable. So we be unreasonable first." Bennett took Dylan directly to Adeline's temporary office in a secure facility Russo had arranged. When Adeline saw Dylan's face, she knew immediately something was wrong. "What happened?" "Dylan has something to tell you," Bennett said. "And you're going to want to sit down for this." The explanation took another 20 minutes. Adeline's face went through shock, anger, betrayal, and finally something that looked like understanding. When Dylan finished, she was quiet for a long time. "Why didn't you come to me?" she asked finally. "When they first took Grayson, why didn't you ask for help?" Because they said if I told anyone, they'd kill him. And because I was ashamed. What kind of father lets his son get taken? What kind of man betrays someone who's been nothing but good to him? Dylan couldn't look at her. I know you'll never forgive me. I know I'll go to prison for this. I just want Grayson back. That's all I want. Adeline stood, walked to the window overlooking downtown Chicago. You're not going to prison. Not if we can help it. And we're going to get Grayson back because that's what people do when they're family. You've worked with me for 4 years, Dylan. We've built this company together. I'm not abandoning you now. After everything I've done, you did what any parent would do. You protected your son. She turned to face him. Now let us help you finish the job. Bennett spent the next hour outlining his plan. They would continue Dylan's cooperation, but feed the kidnappers false information. They'd set up a meeting, somewhere controlled, where they could spring a trap. And they'd use every resource at Bennett's disposal to locate Grayson before the situation escalated further. This is going to be dangerous, Bennett warned. Once they realize the land is compromised, they'll either cut their losses and run, or they'll escalate. We need to be ready for both scenarios. What do you need from me? Adeline asked. I need you to trust me. And I need authorization to bring in additional help. People from my old life who know how to handle situations like this. You have it. Whatever you need. That night, Bennett made 3 phone calls. The first was to Ashton Walsh, asking him to keep Leela for at least another week. The second was to 2 former teammates who'd gone into private security after leaving the Navy. The third was to Russo. Adeline's security chief, requesting the meeting. Russo arrived at Bennett's apartment an hour later. He was in his 50s, built like a linebacker, with sharp eyes that had seen plenty of action. You wanted to see me? I wanted to tell you that Dylan Porter has been compromised. He's been feeding information to the people trying to take Adeline. But he was coerced. His son was kidnapped. Bennett watched Russo's reaction carefully. Son of a bitch. I knew something was off with him. The way he'd ask about security details, always digging for information. Russo sat heavily on Bennett's worn couch. How do you want to play this? Bennett's worn couch. How do you want to play this? We use Dylan as bait. Set up a situation where the kidnappers think they're getting what they want. Then we take them down. Bennett poured 2 glasses of water, handed one to Russo. But I need to know I can trust you. Really trust you. Because if there's another leak in Adeline's organization, people are going to die. Russo met his eyes. I've been protecting people for 25 years. Took 3 bullets for a senator in Somalia. Lost my partner in Kabul. I know what real threats look like, and this is real. Whoever's after Ms. Scott has serious resources and 0 conscience. But I can tell you with absolute certainty that I'm not compromised. My loyalty is to her, period. Bennett studied the man, using every instinct he'd developed over a decade of operations. Russo was telling the truth, or at least he believed he was telling the truth. Okay then, here's the plan. They worked through the night. Coordinating details, reaching out to contacts. Building a trap sophisticated enough to catch professional kidnappers. By dawn, Bennett had a plan that might work. It would require precision, timing, and a considerable amount of luck. But it was the best chance they had to get Grayson back and end the threat to Adeline. The trap was set for a Friday night. 10 days after the parking garage incident. Dylan had informed his handlers that Adeline would be working late at a satellite office in Evanston, a suburb north of Chicago. Light security, minimal staff, perfect opportunity for another extraction attempt. What Dylan's handlers didn't know was that Adeline wouldn't actually be there. Instead, Bennett and his team would be waiting. Everything was in position. Russo's security team covered all exits. Bennett's former teammates, Cole Palmer and Nolan Curtis, were positioned on adjacent buildings with long-range surveillance. Local police were on standby 2 blocks away. ready to move on Bennett's signal. Bennett sat in the office's security room, watching multiple camera feeds. The sun had set an hour ago. The building was dark except for lights in the executive suite, where a woman matching Adeline's build sat at a desk, wearing a wig and similar clothing. From a distance, the decoy was convincing. Movement on the north side. Cole's voice came through Bennett's earpiece. 2 vehicles. Van and sedan. At least 6 occupants visible. Copy, Bennett replied. Let them approach. We take them when they're committed. The minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness. Bennett's heart rate stayed steady, his breathing controlled. This was familiar territory, the calm before action. The moment when training and instinct merged into something beyond conscious thought. The assault came fast. 2 men approached the building's service entrance, defeated the lock in under 30 seconds. Professional work. They moved through the building in tactical formation, heading straight for the executive suite where the decoy waited. They're inside, Bennett said into his mic. All units hold position until my signal. But something felt wrong. Bennett's instincts, honed over years of operations, were screaming warnings. The assault team was moving too confidently, like they knew it was a trap and didn't care. Cole, do you have eyes on the vehicles? Negative. They pulled away 30 seconds ago. The assault team came in on foot. That wasn't standard extraction protocol. You kept vehicles close for a fast exit. Unless this was a diversion. Understanding hit Bennett like cold water. It's not a trap for them. It's a trap for us. Everyone abort now. Get out of the building. But he was 3 seconds too late. The explosion that ripped through the executive suite was massive, carefully placed to maximize damage. The building's entire top floor erupted in flame and debris. Windows shattered. Alarms screamed. And Bennett's earpiece filled with static and shouting. He was already moving, racing toward the stairwell, calling out to his team. Status report. Everyone check in. Russo's voice came through, strained but intact. We're clear. Ground floor team evacuated when we heard your warning. Cole? Nolan? Nothing but static. Bennett's blood ran cold. His teammates had been in the adjacent building, directly in line with the blast. He burst out of the building, sprinted across the parking lot toward their position. Fire trucks were already arriving, sirens splitting the night. He found Cole first, thrown clear by the blast but unconscious. His body sprawled on the roof access of the neighboring building. Alive but badly injured. Nolan was 10 feet away, moving slowly, blood streaming from a head wound. I'm okay, Nolan gasped. Cole needs medical, now. Bennett was calling for paramedics when his personal phone rang. Not his work phone, his personal cell. The number that only 5 people in the world had. He answered to hear Lila's terrified voice. Dad? There are men here. At Mr. Walsh's house. They have guns. They're asking for you. They said. The phone was ripped away. A man's voice came on, the same accented voice from the earlier warning call. Mr. Steele, you didn't listen. You should have walked away. Now we have your daughter and the Walsh family. You have 2 hours to bring us Adeline Scott, alive and cooperative. The exchange location will be sent to you shortly. Come alone. Bring anyone else, and the little girl dies. Understand? The phone went dead. Bennett stood in the parking lot, surrounded by chaos and fire. His teammate badly injured, his trap turned against him. And somewhere across the city, his daughter was in the hands of people who had just tried to kill a building full of his colleagues. Every promise he'd made, every boundary he'd set, every attempt to keep Leela separate from this world had failed. They had his daughter, and Bennett. Steele was about to show them exactly why that was the worst mistake they'd ever made. Bennett's hands didn't shake as he ended the call. Years of training had taught him to channel fear into cold calculation. to transform terror into tactical precision. But inside, something primal and dangerous was awakening. They had threatened many things over the past weeks, but now they'd crossed the one line that turned him from a protector into something far more lethal. They had taken his daughter. Russo appeared at his side, blood on his face from flying glass. "Bennett, what happened?" "You look, they have Leela and the Walsh family. 2 hours to deliver Adeline or they start killing hostages." Bennett's voice was flat, devoid of emotion. The tactical part of his brain was already running scenarios, calculating odds, identifying resources. "Get Cole to the hospital." "Nolan, you're with me." "You can't seriously be considering giving them Adeline," Russo said. "I'm not. But I am going to get my daughter back." Bennett pulled out his phone, started making calls. "And to do that, I need to know exactly who I'm dealing with." The first call was to Adeline. "They have Leela. I need you somewhere safe with armed security." "Don't argue, just move, now." The second call was to a contact he hadn't spoken to in 3 years. Special Agent Thania Foster from the FBI's Organized Crime Division. She answered on the second ring. "Bennett Steele. I heard you were back in the game. What do you need?" "Everything you have on CyberShield Solutions and Preston Ford. Corporate structure, known associates, offshore accounts. And I need it in the next 30 minutes. That's classified corporate intelligence. I can't just..." "Thania, they have my daughter. They have a family of 5. I'm going to get them back with or without FBI help, but it'll go cleaner if you give me what I need." There was a pause. "Give me your email. You'll have everything we have in 20 minutes. But Bennett, when this is over, you and I are going to have a conversation about operating outside legal channels. Looking forward to it." The third call was to Dylan Porter. "I need you to contact your handlers. Tell them you can deliver Adeline to a location of their choosing. Play it desperate. Make them believe you're trying to save your son by giving them what they want. They'll know it's a trap after what just happened. Maybe, but they also know they're running out of time. Adeline's security just got upgraded significantly after tonight's attack. Their window for a clean extraction is closing. They'll take the chance." Bennett was already moving toward his truck. "Make the call. Send me the location as soon as you have it." Nolan climbed into the passenger seat, his head wound bandaged with gauze from the trauma kit. "You have a plan?" "Working on it." "How's your shooting arm?" "Good enough." "What are we walking into?" "Probably a kill box. They'll expect me to come alone, expect me to be emotional and sloppy. They won't expect a 2-man tactical assault." Bennett pulled into traffic, heading toward his apartment. "We're going to need equipment. Body armor, weapons, communications gear. Everything I put into storage 3 years ago." "You kept a go bag?" "Old habits." Bennett had maintained a storage unit across the city, filled with equipment from his Navy days. He'd told himself it was just pragmatism, that selling it wasn't worth the hassle. But part of him had always known this day might come. "We've got maybe 90 minutes before they send the location. That's enough time to gear up and run reconnaissance." The storage unit was in a facility near O'Hare Airport, industrial and anonymous. Bennett opened the unit to reveal carefully maintained equipment. 2 sets of body armor, suppressed weapons, night vision optics, medical supplies. Everything a 2-man team would need for a direct action mission. Nolan let out a low whistle. "You really did leave it all behind, didn't you?" "You really did leave it all behind, didn't you?" "Tried to." Bennett pulled out a tactical vest, started loading magazines. "Thought I could be just a father, just a regular person. But that world doesn't let you go. It just waits for the right moment to pull you back in." His phone buzzed. An email from Thania Foster with encrypted files. Bennett opened them on his laptop, started reading while Nolan prepared equipment. CyberShield Solutions was owned through a series of shell corporations by 3 primary investors, One was Preston Ford, the public face. The second was a venture capital firm with ties to Eastern European organized crime. The third was a consulting group that the FBI suspected was a front for Russian intelligence services. This isn't just corporate espionage, Bennett said, scanning through financial records. This is state-sponsored industrial theft. The Russians want Adelin's technology. They're using CyberShield as a cutout, and they've hired professional contractors to handle the wet work. How does that help us get Lila back? Because it tells us they won't kill the hostages if they think there's a chance of getting what they want. Dead hostages mean burned bridges and maximum law enforcement response. They'll keep everyone alive until they're certain the operation is blown. Bennett closed the laptop. We've got a window. Small one, but it exists. Dylan's text came through at 10:47 p.m. Exchange location, Thornton Industrial Park. Building 7, midnight. Come alone or the girl dies first. Thornton Industrial Park was 30 minutes south of the city. A collection of abandoned warehouses awaiting demolition. Perfect location for what they had planned. Isolated, multiple entry points, lots of cover. It would also be perfect for an ambush. We need eyes on site before I go in, Bennett said, studying satellite imagery on his phone. Can you get into position without being spotted? Give me 40 minutes and a decent rifle. I'll find a perch. Nolan checked his weapon, loaded extra magazines. What's your play once you're inside? I locate Lila and the Walsh family. Confirm they're alive. Then I stall for as long as possible while you identify targets and establish firing solutions. Bennett pulled on his body armor under a heavy jacket. When I give the signal, you take out their leadership. I handle immediate threats. We extract the hostages in the chaos. That's a terrible plan. At least 6 things can go wrong. You have a better one? Nolan was quiet for a moment. No, but Bennett, if this goes sideways, if it comes down to a choice between your life and Lila's, it won't. I'm getting her out of there. Whatever it takes. They drove to Thornton Industrial Park in separate vehicles. Nolan peeled off 2 miles out, heading for an elevated position overlooking Building 7. Bennett continued alone. Pulling into the parking lot at 11:53 p.m. The building was 3 stories of concrete and broken windows, graffiti covering the lower walls. 2 vehicles were parked outside, a van and an SUV. Bennett counted at least 4 figures visible through the ground floor windows. Not great odds, but he'd worked with worse. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Come to the main entrance. Hands visible. Any weapons and the girl dies. Bennett left his pistol in the truck, keeping only a small blade concealed at his ankle. He walked toward the building with his hands raised, every sense alert for additional threats. The main entrance door opened. A man emerged, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing tactical gear. He held a pistol casually at his side. Mr. Steele, thank you for being punctual. I'm Jackson Sullivan, project manager for this operation. His accent placed him from somewhere in the Midwest, not Eastern European like Bennett expected. You understand the terms? We get Miss Scott, alive and cooperative. You get your daughter and the Walsh family. I understand. But I need to see them first. Need to know they're alive. Of course. Professional courtesy. Jackson gestured for Bennett to enter the building. After you. The interior was exactly what Bennett expected. Open floor plan, minimal furniture, too many shadows. 4 additional men were visible, all armed, all watching him carefully. And there, in the center of the space, sitting on chairs with zip-tied hands, were Lila, Ashton Walsh, his wife Rianne, and their 3 teenagers. Lila's face was tear-streaked, but defiant. When she saw Bennett, her expression shifted to relief and fear in equal measure. Dad, it's okay, baby. I'm getting you out of here. I promise. How touching, Jackson said. Father-daughter reunion. But we have business to discuss. Where is Miss Scott? On her way. Should be here in 20 minutes. Bennett was scanning the room, counting exits, identifying threats, looking for anything he could use. But before she arrives, I want to know who I'm really dealing with. You're not Russian contractors. You move like American Special Operations. Former Delta, Navy Rangers. So who's really pulling the strings here? Jackson smiled. You're perceptive. Yes, my team is former military. We work for the highest bidder. Currently, that's a consortium of investors who want Ms. Scott's technology. Who those investors are isn't your concern. Let me guess. Preston Ford and his Russian backers. They've been trying to acquire Frontier Tech for months. When Adeline refused to sell, they decided to take it by force. Like I said, perceptive. But also irrelevant. The business deal is above your pay grade, Mr. Steele. Your job is simple. Deliver the asset. Collect your daughter. Walk away. Except you're not going to let us walk away. The moment Adeline arrives, you'll kill everyone in this building to eliminate witnesses. Bennett took a step closer, his hands still raised. That's how this works. You can't leave loose ends. That's a pessimistic view. Perhaps we're honorable professionals who keep our word. You kidnapped a teenager to extort his father. You planted explosives in an office building. You threatened to kill hostages. There's nothing honorable about any of this. Jackson's smile faded. You're stalling. Why are you stalling, Mr. Steele? Because I needed to confirm something. Bennett's voice was cold now. I needed to know if you were smart enough to post sentries on the perimeter. If you had counter-sniper protocols. If you'd done proper threat assessment before setting up this exchange. What are you talking about? Bennett's earpiece crackled with Nolan's voice. 6 targets identified. Clear shots on 4. Say when. The thing about former military contractors, Bennett continued, is that you get comfortable. You start thinking civilian law enforcement is the only threat. You forget about guys like me. Guys who still know how to run tactical operations. Understanding dawned on Jackson's face. He raised his weapon, but Bennett was already moving. Now, Bennett said into his mic. The first shot came through the second-story window. Taking out the guard nearest Lila, suppressed, nearly silent. The man dropped before anyone realized what was happening. The second shot hit one of the men near the door. Bennett used the confusion to move. He dove for the nearest guard, drove his concealed blade into the man's thigh, then stripped his weapon. A burst of gunfire forced Jackson to take cover. Bennett fired twice, dropped another guard, then turned toward Lila. Stay down, he shouted. All of you get down. Ashton Walsh, despite his hands being bound, was already moving. He threw himself over his family, creating a human shield. Bennett's respect for the man jumped several levels. Jackson and his remaining operative were returning fire now, but they couldn't locate Nolan's position. Another suppressed shot dropped the 4th guard. That left Jackson and one other hostile. Bennett moved toward Lila, using overturned furniture for cover. Rounds stitched across the concrete near his head, too close. He returned fire, forcing Jackson back. You're making a mistake, Jackson shouted. We have resources you can't imagine. People who will come after you, after your daughter, until this debt is paid. Then they'll die too. Bennett reached Lila, cut her restraints with his blade. Can you run? She nodded, terrified but focused. When I say go, you run for the east exit. Don't stop, don't look back. Nolan will cover you. He moved to free the Walsh family. Ashton, get your family out, now. But Jackson had other plans. He grabbed something from his vest, threw it into the center of the room. Bennett recognized it instantly. Flashbang. He turned away, covered his ears, pulled Lila close to shield her. The detonation was overwhelming, sound and light erasing everything for precious seconds. When Bennett's senses returned, Jackson and his remaining operative were gone, and the building was on fire. The flames spread faster than Bennett expected, racing up walls and across debris-strewn floors. Someone had pre-positioned accelerants throughout the building, insurance against exactly this scenario. If they couldn't complete their mission, they'd destroy the evidence and everyone in it. "Everybody out," Bennett shouted, pushing Lila toward Ashton. "East exit, move now." But the east exit, when they reached it, was blocked. Jackson's remaining operative had collapsed the doorframe with a small explosive charge, trapping them inside. Smoke was already filling the first floor, thick and toxic. Bennett's tactical mind raced through alternatives. North exit was their entry point, probably covered by Jackson. South exit led to the parking lot, but that meant exposure in the open. West exit opened onto the loading docks, which might provide cover. "West side," he commanded, leading the group through smoke and flame. Lila coughed beside him, her small hand locked around his. Behind them, Ashton was half carrying his youngest daughter while Rianne shepherded the teenagers. They reached the loading dock area. The bay doors were closed but not locked. Bennett kicked one open and cold night air rushed in, a brief relief before the influx of oxygen fed the fire behind them, making it roar louder. "Nolan, where are you?" Bennett said into his mic. Static. The communications gear had been damaged, either by the flashbang or by something else. Bennett was on his own. They emerged into the loading area to find Jackson waiting. He stood beside the van, something large and military-grade in his hands. A rocket launcher, probably an RPG captured from overseas operations. "I told you this was a mistake," Jackson said, his face illuminated by the growing fire. "You should have made the deal. Should have given us what we wanted. Now everyone dies." He aimed the launcher not at Bennett, but at the building's support structure, the columns holding up the floors above them. Bennett had maybe 2 seconds to act. He pushed Lila and the Walsh family back through the doorway, shouting for them to run deeper into the building, away from the blast zone. Then he raised his stolen weapon and fired at Jackson. The rounds went wide. Jackson was already moving, already triggering the launcher. The rocket streaked across the space, impacted the support column with devastating force. The explosion was massive, the concussive wave throwing Bennett backward into the burning building. The world became noise and chaos. The building's structural integrity, already compromised by fire, failed catastrophically. 3 stories of concrete and steel began to collapse inward, tons of debris falling with horrifying inevitability. Bennett scrambled to his feet, his ears ringing, his vision blurred. "Lila," he screamed. "Where are you?" He found her 30 feet away, pinned under a fallen beam, but alive, conscious, terrified. Ashton was digging at the rubble around her, trying to free her, but the beam was too heavy. "Help me," Ashton gasped. "I can't lift it alone." Bennett grabbed one end of the beam, put everything he had into lifting. His shoulder, still healing from the bullet wound, screamed in protest. The beam shifted, rose 6 inches. Ashton pulled Lila free, her leg bleeding but not broken. "The others," Rianne shouted. She was 10 feet away with 2 of her teenagers, but her oldest son, Hudson, was trapped under different debris, his legs pinned. More of the building was coming down. Bennett could see the ceiling buckling, hear the groaning of stressed metal. They had seconds, not minutes. "Get Lila out," he told Ashton. "I'll get Hudson. You can't lift that alone. Go now, that's an order." Ashton hesitated for only a moment, then grabbed Layla and ran for the exit, Rianne and the other teenagers following. Bennett turned to Hudson, assessed the debris. A section of floor from the 3rd story had collapsed, creating a pocket. Hudson was trapped but not crushed. There was a way to free him, but it required moving other pieces first. Creating a sequence of shifts that might trigger total collapse, Bennett worked with desperate speed. Using a steel rod as a lever, shifting weight incrementally. Hudson was crying, in shock, his young face gray with pain and fear. "Stay with me," Bennett said, his voice surprisingly calm. "You're going to be fine. Just stay calm and let me work." The building groaned again. A support beam overhead cracked, sagging lower. Bennett had maybe 30 seconds before everything came down. He got the last piece of debris, shifted, reached for Hudson. "Can you move your legs?" "I think so. It hurts, but I can feel them." "Good enough. On 3, you're going to push yourself backward while I pull. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Hudson moved, Bennett pulled, and the teenager came free. Bennett threw Hudson over his shoulder in a fireman's carry, turned toward the exit, took 3 steps before the building made its final surrender to gravity. The collapse was total. Floors pancaking down, walls imploding. Everything Bennett had ever feared about structural failure happening at once. He ran, faster than seemed possible, carrying a 16-year-old. As the wave of destruction chased him, he made it to the loading dock, threw Hudson through the door, dove after him. The building came down behind them, a mountain of rubble and flame where humans had stood moments before. Bennett lay on the cold concrete, gasping for air, his body screaming. Hudson was beside him, alive, crying, but alive. Ahead, he could see Ashton and his family huddled in the parking lot. See Layla being held by Rianne, her face buried in the woman's shoulder. His daughter was safe. The Walsh family was safe. The mission was complete. Bennett tried to stand. Couldn't. His legs wouldn't support his weight. He looked down to see blood, a lot of blood, from wounds he didn't remember receiving. The adrenaline was wearing off, and with it came pain. Overwhelming, consuming pain. "Dad." Layla was running toward him, Ashton trying to hold her back but failing. She reached Bennett, grabbed his hand. "You're hurt. You're bleeding. Dad, stay awake. Please stay awake." "I'm okay," he managed, though he wasn't. His vision was tunneling, his breathing shallow. "You're safe. That's all that matters." Sirens in the distance. Fire trucks, ambulances, police. Help was coming, but Bennett wasn't sure it would arrive in time. He'd lost too much blood, taken too much damage. His body was shutting down, systems failing one by one. "Bennett, look at me." Nolan's face appeared above him, the sniper's expression grim. "Stay with us. Medical is 3 minutes out. You've survived worse than this." "Leela," Bennett whispered. "Take care of her. If I don't make it, you're making it. That's not negotiable. You've got too much to live for." But Bennett could feel himself slipping away, the darkness at the edges of his vision spreading inward. He'd completed his mission, saved his daughter, proven that the strong really could protect the weak. Maybe that was enough. Maybe Emily would be proud of what he'd done. He hoped she would be proud. The last thing he heard, before consciousness faded, was Layla's voice. Desperate and terrified, calling his name. Then nothing. Bennett woke to white ceiling tiles and the steady beep of medical monitors. His entire body felt like one massive bruise, every breath a reminder of damaged ribs and strained muscles. But he was alive, which seemed like a minor miracle given how the night had ended. "Dad!" Leela's face appeared above him, tear-streaked but smiling. "You're awake. The doctor said you might sleep for days, but you're awake." "Hey, kiddo," Bennett's voice came out as a rasp. "How long was I out?" 18 hours. They did surgery on your shoulder and your leg. You had something called a collapsed lung, and you lost a lot of blood." She squeezed his hand carefully, like he might break. "But you're going to be okay. They promised me you're going to be okay." Ashton Walsh appeared in the doorway, his arm in a sling but otherwise looking healthy. "The hero wakes. About time. We were starting to worry. Hudson? Your family? Everyone's fine. Hudson has 2 broken bones in his left foot, but the doctors say he'll make a full recovery. My wife and the other teenagers have minor injuries, smoke inhalation, cuts and bruises. Nothing that won't heal. Ashton's expression turned serious. Bennett, you saved my son's life. Saved all our lives. There aren't words adequate to thank you for that. You'd have done the same for Leela. Maybe, but you actually did it. Which counts for a lot more than theoretical courage. Over the next hour, Bennett got updates from various visitors. Nolan had escaped the building collapse with minor injuries and had provided critical testimony to the FBI. Cole was recovering from surgery, expected to make a full recovery within 3 months. Russo and his team had secured Adeline at a safe location and were coordinating with federal authorities, and then Adeline herself arrived, carrying flowers and wearing an expression that mixed relief, guilt, and something Bennett couldn't quite identify. "You look terrible," she said, sitting in the chair Lila vacated. "You should see the other guys." I did. On the news. Federal agents arrested Preston Ford this morning, along with 7 executives from CyberShield Solutions. They found evidence of conspiracy to commit kidnapping, industrial espionage, and about a dozen other charges. Ford's looking at 20 years minimum. What about the Russian backers? That's the interesting part. The FBI discovered that Ford had been playing both sides. He took money from the Russians, promised them my technology, but was actually planning to sell them fake encryption codes while keeping the real ones for himself. When the Russians figured it out, they pulled their support. That's why the extraction team used Americans instead of Eastern European contractors. Ford was trying to salvage the operation with limited resources. Bennett processed this. So the whole thing was collapsing anyway. We just accelerated the timeline. Maybe. But without you, I'd be dead or worse. Dylan's son Grayson was found too. He was being held at a property owned by one of Ford's shell companies. He's safe now, reunited with his father. Adeline reached out, carefully took Bennett's hand. "You did more than save my life, Bennett. You saved my company, saved Dylan's family, saved the Walsh family. You're a genuine hero. I'm just a father who protected his daughter. You're more than that. You're someone who runs toward danger when everyone else runs away. Someone who keeps promises even when they're hard. Someone who deserves so much better than what life has given him." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "The job offer still stands. Actually, I'd like to expand it. Head of security, but also partner. I want you to have equity in Frontier Tech, a real stake in what we're building. You've earned it. You've earned it. Adeline, I appreciate that, but I'm not sure I'm the right person for corporate life. Then help me build something different. A division of Frontier Tech focused on protection services for people who need it. Victims of corporate espionage, people being extorted, whistleblowers who need security. We use your skills and my resources to help people who can't afford traditional protection services." Bennett looked at Lila, who was listening from the doorway. "What do you think, kiddo? Should I take the job?" Layla came back into the room, climbed carefully onto the edge of Bennett's hospital bed. "Will you have to go away a lot? Will you miss more stuff?" "I'll make sure he doesn't," Adeline said firmly. "Flexible schedule, remote work when possible, and Leela comes first. Always, that's non-negotiable. And you'll help people? Like you helped Ms. Adeline and Mr. Dillon's son? That's the idea." Leela was quiet for a long moment, her face scrunched up in concentration. Finally, she nodded. "Mom used to say that we should use our gifts to help people. You're really good at protecting people, Dad. Maybe you should keep doing it, but in a way where you don't almost die. I'll work on that part." 3 months later, Bennett stood in the newly opened offices of Frontier Protection Services, a subsidiary of Frontier Tech dedicated to providing security and investigative services to high-risk individuals. The space was modern and professional, with a tactical operations center, training facilities, and offices for the growing staff. Nolan and Cole had signed on as senior operators. Russo came over from Adeline's personal security detail to run daily operations. They'd recruited 6 more former special operations personnel, all carefully vetted, all committed to the mission of protecting people who needed it most. Lila had her own small office, decorated with her artwork, where she could do homework after school while Bennett worked. It wasn't perfect, but it was working. She was seeing a therapist to process the trauma of the kidnapping, and some nights she still had nightmares. But she was also stronger, more resilient, proud of her father in a way that made all the pain worthwhile. The Thornton case officially closed today, Adeline said, joining Bennett in his office. Preston Ford pleaded guilty to all charges. Dylan Porter received immunity for his cooperation. Grayson is back in school and apparently doing well. Good. That's good. And I have something for you. She handed him an envelope. Open it. Inside was a check for $2 million. Bennett stared at it, not quite believing what he was seeing. That's your share of the reward the banks offered for protecting their encryption technology, Adeline explained. Plus bonuses from the board of directors. Plus my personal thank you for saving my life multiple times. Adeline, this is too much. It's not enough, but it's a start, she smiled. Put it toward Lila's college fund. Buy a house. Take a vacation. Do something that brings you joy, Bennett. You've earned it. That evening, Bennett took Lila to dinner at a nice restaurant, the kind they'd never been able to afford before. She ordered pasta with fancy cheese, he got a steak, and they talked about normal things. School and friends and whether octopuses were cooler than dolphins. Are you happy, Dad? Lila asked as they waited for dessert. Yeah, kiddo. I think I am. Are you? I'm happy you're not working at the diner anymore. I'm happy we have a nice place to live now. I'm happy you don't look sad all the time. She paused. I think Mom would be happy too. You're helping people like she did, just in a different way. Bennett felt his throat tighten. I hope so. I really hope so. Do you think you'll ever, date anyone? Like Ms. Adeline? She looks at you sometimes like she wants to be more than just your boss. That's very observant and complicated. I loved your mom very much. Still do, I know. But she's gone, Dad, and she wouldn't want you to be alone forever. She'd want you to be happy, to find someone who makes you smile the way she did. Lila reached across the table, took his hand. It's okay if you like Ms. Adeline. I like her too. She's nice to me and she makes you laugh, which you didn't do much before. When did you get so wise? I'm 10 now. That's basically an adult. Bennett laughed, the sound surprising him with its genuineness. Maybe Lila was right. Maybe Emily would want him to move forward, to build a new life that honored her memory without being imprisoned by it. Maybe it was time to stop surviving and start living again. 2 weeks later, Bennett asked Adeline to dinner. Just the two of them, no business discussions, no security briefings. An actual date, his first since Emily's death. They went to a quiet Italian place in Lincoln Park, sat by the window watching the city move past. Talked about everything and nothing. Their childhoods and favorite books, and what they wanted from life now that they'd both survived the impossible. I'm terrified of this, Adeline admitted over dessert. Terrified of messing it up, of not being what you need, of trying to fill a space that belongs to someone else. Emily will always be part of my life, Bennett said honestly. But that doesn't mean there's no room for anyone else. I loved her completely, and I think I could love again if I let myself. If you're patient with me while I figure out how. I can be patient. I spent 10 years building a company from nothing. I understand that good things take time. She reached across the table, her hand finding his. No pressure, no expectations. Just two people who've been through something terrible together, trying to build something good from it. I can work with that. They took it slow, built it carefully. Coffee dates and family dinners with Lila included. movie nights and long walks by the lake. Gradually, cautiously, allowing something new to grow in the space Emily's death had left behind. It wasn't the same as what Bennett had with Emily. Nothing ever would be. But it was real and honest and surprisingly comfortable. Adeline understood his nightmares and his hypervigilance. He understood her workaholic tendencies and her fear of vulnerability. They were two broken people learning how to be whole again, together. 6 months after the Thornton incident, Bennett woke in his new house. An actual house with a yard and a mortgage, to find Lila making breakfast. Badly, but making it nonetheless. "I wanted to surprise you," she said, presenting a plate of slightly burnt pancakes. "They're not as good as yours, but I tried. They're perfect." Bennett ate them, every bite, while Lila beamed with pride. His phone buzzed. A text from Adeline, morning briefing in 2 hours. "Also dinner tonight? My place? I'm cooking." Bennett smiled. This was his life now. Protecting people who needed it, raising his daughter, building something new with someone who understood him. It wasn't the quiet, invisible existence he'd tried to create 3 years ago. But it was honest work that mattered, relationships that fulfilled him, and a future that felt possible instead of just survivable. He thought about Emily, hoped she could see what he'd built from the ashes of their tragedy, hoped she approved. Of Adeline, of the work he was doing, of the father he'd become to Lila. He hoped she knew he'd kept his promise. He'd taken care of their daughter, taken care of himself, and found a way to keep fighting for what mattered without losing himself in the process. The strong protect the weak. That's what Emily had believed. And Bennett Steele, former Navy SEAL and current protector of people who needed it most, was living proof that belief could change the world. One rescue at a time. 1 year after the Thornton incident, Bennett stood in front of a memorial wall at Frontier Protection Services headquarters. The wall honored those who'd sacrificed for others, permanent recognition of courage and service. 3 names were engraved in polished stone. Emily Steele, architect, humanitarian, believer in building hope. Marcus Webb, security professional who died protecting his principal. Cole Palmer, operator who took critical injuries saving civilians. Cole had survived his injuries, but retired from active duty, now running training programs for new recruits. He stood beside Bennett at the memorial unveiling, his arms still in a brace, but his spirit intact. "She'd be proud of you," Cole said quietly, gesturing to Emily's name. "What you've built here, the people you've helped, the man you've become, she'd be really proud." "I hope so. I try to honor her every day." The memorial ceremony drew over 200 people. Clients Frontier Protection Services had helped, employees who believed in the mission, family members of those being honored. Leela stood with Adeline near the front, both wearing dresses for the occasion. His daughter had grown 3 inches. In the past year, her face losing some of its roundness, becoming the young woman she'd eventually be. After the ceremony, people mingled in the reception area. Bennett found himself surrounded by grateful clients sharing stories of how his team had protected them from corporate espionage, domestic threats, and situations the police couldn't handle. A woman named Cassidy Rhodes thanked him for protecting her family when her ex-husband violated a restraining order. A whistleblower named Hunter Tate credited Bennett's team with keeping him alive long enough to testify against his former employer. Story after story of lives saved, dangers averted, hope restored. "This is what we were meant to do," Adeline said, appearing at his side. She wore an elegant navy dress that matched her eyes, her hand finding his naturally. "Not just building technology or making money, but actually making people safer. We make a good team. We do." She looked up at him, something vulnerable and hopeful in her expression. "Bennett, I've been thinking about the future. About us. About what comes next." "That sounds serious." "It is serious. I love you. I love Leila. I want to build a life with both of you, officially. Not just dating and spending time together. but actually building something permanent. She took a breath. I know it's fast. I know Emily will always be part of your life, and I respect that. But I also know that life is short and unpredictable, and when you find something real, you should hold on to it. Bennett looked across the room at Lila, who was showing one of the new recruits her latest artwork. His daughter caught his eye and smiled, giving him a small thumbs up. They'd talked about this possibility, about Adeline maybe becoming more than just Dad's girlfriend. Lila had been enthusiastically supportive. I love you too, Bennett said, turning back to Adeline. And yes, I want to build something permanent. I want mornings with you and Lila. Want to watch her grow up with both of us there. Want to build a family that honors what came before while creating something new. So that's a yes? That's absolutely a yes. 6 months later, they stood in the same park where Bennett had saved Adeline from kidnapping, surrounded by friends and family. Small ceremony, just the people who mattered most. Ashton Walsh officiated, having gotten ordained specifically for the occasion. Lila served as maid of honor, wearing a dress she'd helped design. The vows were simple and honest. Bennett promised to love Adeline completely while honoring Emily's memory. Adeline promised to love Lila as her own daughter, to support Bennett's healing. To build a life worthy of the sacrifices made to bring them together. When they kissed, Lila cheered louder than anyone. The reception was held at their home. The house Bennett had bought with his reward money. It had a big backyard where Lila could play. A home office where both he and Adeline could work. And enough space for the family they were building together. As the sun set over Chicago, Bennett stood on his back porch watching guests mingle. Cole was teaching Lila some kind of tactical hand signals, making her laugh. Nolan was arguing good-naturedly with Russo about security protocols. Dylan Porter and his son Grayson were playing catch, both of them healthy and whole after their ordeal. Adeline appeared beside him, now his wife, wrapping her arms around him from behind. Happy? She asked, completely, terrifyingly, wonderfully happy. He turned to face her. 3 years ago, I thought my life was over. Thought I'd just survive, just exist for Lila's sake. I never imagined this. Never thought I'd love again or find purpose beyond just getting through each day. Emily would approve, you know. Of us, of what you're doing, of the man you've become. I think so too. I hope so. They stood together as darkness fell and lights came on in the yard. This was his life now. Husband to a brilliant woman who understood him. Father to a resilient daughter who made him proud every day. Protector of people who needed it most. Leader of a team dedicated to making the world safer. That it wasn't the life he'd planned. But it was real and full and worth every sacrifice, every struggle, every moment of pain that had brought him here. Bennett Steele had survived the worst life could throw at him. And on the other side of that darkness, he'd found not just survival, but genuine joy. Not just existence, but actual living. The strong protect the weak. Emily had taught him that. And Bennett had learned that sometimes the strong need protecting too. That vulnerability wasn't weakness. That asking for help was courage. That building a new life didn't mean forgetting the old one. He'd kept his promises. To Emily, to Lila, to himself. And he'd found something he never expected. A second chance at happiness. Built on sacrifice and hope and the unshakable belief that tomorrow could be better than today. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.